We are gathered to try to responsibly attend to the urgency of the hour. And as we all know, the hour is very urgent. I prepared my little meditative talks, my little Sunday school speech I'm going to give you all this morning. It should be about 15 to 20 minutes. And following that, we're going to share and we're going to talk. On my way down here, the president said that DEI had something to do with, and I'm angry with the consistent and everyday onslaught to my intelligence, to my person, to my people, to marginalized people everywhere. Every day. And so I have a phrase that I use. During the day, I guard my heart, and at night, I cover my soul. Because anger will make you hate. And the last thing that I want to do is to hate anybody. I remember the words of Dr. King that said, I've seen too much hate to hate. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I've seen it twist and distort the faces of Klansmen in the South. I've seen too much hate to hate. So I don't want to hate anybody. And so one of the ways by which I translate my feelings is to write. I write to stay sane. And so I want to make just a couple of remarks to you, some out of my own writing, and some of what I believe is needed in this hour. And I had a friend, his name was Charles Edward Booth, former pastor of Olivet Baptist Church in Columbus, Ohio. He had a phrase called, he used to say, I'm going to keep preaching till preaching come back in style. The night that Lehman Brothers crashed in 2008 that led to the part of the great financial crash, he called me about 9 o'clock, 9:30 that night and says, Frank, preaching is back in style. I think preaching is back in style. And some of what I'm working on in my life is what I call a preaching renaissance. I think American Christianity is in profound need of revival. Much of American Christianity is on life support. But I believe that the beauty, the depth, the power, the imagination, the creativity of African American preaching can generate a preaching renaissance to revive American Christianity in the 21st century. And so I think it's time for preaching to get back in style and the preachers to stand up and speak to the issues. Now, not all of Black preaching, I'm talking about the liberation tradition. Not all of Black preaching is involved in the liberation tradition. I'm not talking about, I brought a book with me in a bag I got somewhere. Yusef, could you hand me that? This is by Theron Williams out of Indianapolis, Indiana. It's called Black Church, White Theology. And he goes deep and profound. So to somebody watching me across the internet or somebody in this room, I recommend it as a resource because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about white theology in the face of a Black church. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the liberating gospel. I'm talking about preaching the Bible with a sense of the liberation of the marginalized, the poor, and the oppressed. And I want this morning to challenge preachers to step up your game. I want to challenge preachers. I have an analogy that I use. When I grew up, my mama used to have, and my daddy, who was both a cook, they would have a pot of grease in the middle of the stove. And any of y'all that grew up in that kind of house know that a lot of stuff flowed in and out of that grease. Gravy was made through that grease. You know, y'all remember it. Y'all remember it. And we ate what our parents served us because we thought that they would never do us harm in the food that they would serve. If I walked up in your house today and you had a pot of grease on the stove, I'm not eating. Because we know that grease clogs arteries. So if you are still in 2025 serving food that clogs the arteries of people as a preacher, it's incumbent upon the preacher to step up the preacher's game, because the people are going to eat what you serve, because they do not believe their pastor is going to harm them. So it's incumbent upon me as a preacher to up my game, which means I need to be reading, which means I need to be thinking, which means I need to be in forums like this. I need to step up my game so that I'm not serving my people what is not healthy and what is not suitable. And I believe if you're not preaching the gospel that liberates the poor, you're serving grease on the stove. Let me get my second little comment out. This is my Sunday school lesson. This is my second little Sunday school lesson. When in doubt, read the ancestors. This is part of being equipped as a preacher, but also for everybody. When in doubt, so after Donald J. Trump was elected, the next morning I got up in my anger, pain, despair, etc. I listened to Gardner Calvin Taylor. Consult the ancestors. I picked up my James Baldwin. Consult the ancestors. I looked up Toni Morrison. I consulted August Wilson. The ancestors can speak to us. I remembered an interview that I did with Otis Moss Jr. right after the first Trump election in 2016. And I was asking him on the interview, based upon his experience, to speak to the moment, you know, for particularly to some younger people who I teach, who grew up in the Obama age, and they had no idea all this stuff. And he said to me, he said, Frank, what did Black people do when the 1857 Dred Scott decision went down, where the Supreme Court said that white people, that Black people had no rights, that white people were bound to respect? He said, what did our ancestors do? And he asked me, what about 1896 in the Plessy versus Ferguson, when the separate but equal? What did the church do? What did we do? And, you know, because to read, after Lincoln was assassinated, Andrew Johnson, the new president, said, this is a country for white men. And by God, as long as I am the president, it shall be a government for white men. In other words, we've been here before. We've seen this movie before. And our ancestors carried us through it before. We have been here before. and we endured, and we survived, and we thrived, and we built, and we protested, and we picketed, and we preached, and we built institutions. We've been here before. Third thing I want to say, and I only got let me see, number of things I'm going to say are like 5, something like that. I remember the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson said about Nelson Mandela, the struggle was to conquer despair, and after he conquered despair, the South African government was easy. I wonder about despair. I wonder about fear, and I wonder about the intimidation tactics to stir fear in communities of people, to stir fear in us, to come with such a consistent onslaught that we're just overwhelmed and we don't know what to do, and we're in despair and we're running around. And I was thinking about the Wizard of Oz. Remember the wizard with all that smoke and all that mirrors, sound and fury? Remember whenever he called the color change? That's what's because millions of people in that following, the color change. But a lion, a scarecrow, a tin man, Dorothy and Toto brought it all down by revealing that he was a little man behind the curtain, pushing buttons and pulling levers. I believe, let me say it right, because you really have to be careful these days. You really do have to be careful what you say. I believe that it will be revealed for what it is. The difficult part is we're going to have to suffer our way through it, which means people will die. Incompetency means people will die. I listened to some of the crazy conversation on vaccine and anti-vaxxers and all this craziness on yesterday. People are going to die. If we're faithful. So I talk about practical things sometimes. I talk about things like, let's help our people get out of debt. Why do we still owe these people? Particularly if we're buying shoes and purses and sandals and, the coats and hats, the stuff, shiny cars. Nothing wrong with none of that, except if you got to go in debt to do it, it's going to affect your liberation agenda. Why don't we have a national Black People Get Out of Debt campaign? Now, I said Saturday, Buster Soares has something called D-Free, debt-free. There's a whole program. Y'all greet Pastor Donald Parsons. Y'all say hello. He's one of our senior preachers. I am joking, sir. I am joking with him. I was asked to come to Joliet to do a revival, and they said, we want all senior preachers to do 7 last words. We want all senior preachers. And so we want people like you and Reverend Donald Parsons. We want y'all to come because we grew up hearing y'all preach and imitating y'all. We want y'all. I said, seniors? Don't we have a better word than that? So I was messing with him when he's one of our senior preachers. I think we need to talk about buy Black, think Black, give Black. I think we have to re-examine where we shop. And I know the pressure's on. It's a hard, on Saturday I was here doing the thing, and I told him, I go to Trinity and they put up this list about boycotting. So I looked on the list and I saw Tesla. Well, I got a Tesla sitting out there right now. Now I've been working on the divest us of this Tesla. So I ain't talking about quick decisions where, it could be a quick decision. Sometimes you have to divest yourself of things across time. But what's your strategy to spend your money with the people who support you? I'm committed to the black church. I had a T-shirt, a sweatshirt that I was planning to wear, except that it went to the cleaners yesterday because I sent it there. And it says, I still believe in the black church. I still believe that the black church, with all of our frailty and flaws, is the chief institution that has sustained our people and that can bring about change in this nation. I still believe black preaching, I'll say it again, black preaching with its beauty, its depth, its power, its creativity, its imagination can generate a preaching renaissance to revive American Christianity in the 21st century. If it's not marginalized people, who's going to do it? And so I teach black preaching. I love black preaching. I love the black church. I've given my whole life to the black church. And in this moment, I'm more determined than ever that we are, with other marginalized people and other non-marginalized people who are sensitive to our agenda, are the only hope for America. Let me make this last comment on eternal vigilance. I told them on Saturday morning that I worked on a memoir. I've got it finished now. I'm just trying to find a publisher that's willing to publish it. And one of the chapters that I wrote in the thing, I was wrestling with the sacrifices that were made by the civil rights movement. Was it really worth it? Martin King lay dead on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, shot down. Was it really worth it? All the lives that were lost. White preachers, black preachers, Jewish preachers, men, women. Was it really worth it to see these folks just cavalierly X out stuff, won't do the Voting Rights Act? And I decided that that was not the question. The question was not what was worth it, was all that sacrifice worth it? That's a diversionary question, because the real question is, what am I going to do in my generation because they did what they needed to do in their generation? That the question is eternal vigilance. And the fight has to be fought in every generation. And without the sacrifices of John Lewis, without the sacrifices of Martin Luther King Jr., of Jesse Louis Jackson, the civil rights movement, we're going to be sitting here to say this. So it's not about whether or not it was worth it. It's about what we're going to do, eternal vigilance. Because the fact of the matter is, whenever there has been black progress, I don't understand it. I think I do. It's called white rage by Carol Anderson. She explains it as white rage, that anytime black people progress in this country, it sends off an alarm bell in the majority of the white populace, north or south. And they drive to stamp out the progress, and not only stamp it out, but to push us 2 steps backwards. It's endemic. It's historic. It can't be argued each and every time. And this is yet another instance. But eternal vigilance. We fight the fight every time, every generation. We fight the fight every day right now. Many of you I have a relationship with in this room. You all been fighting this fight. And so Finally, I'll say this. When we come to a lot of these roundtable discussions across the years, a lot of us have been in a lot of them. A lot of us say what we should do, including me. But if you permit me to ask you that if you make comments after you get through making comments, that you say what you're willing to do. Y'all hear me that? When I preach in my, and it used to be church, that's how they used to do me, just like y'all just did me. Not what we should do, but what are you willing to do? So I'm concluding my remarks by starting with me. I teach preaching. That's what I do. I've been doing it for 45 years. I can do it. I love to do it. And I would be willing to organize a class, especially for preachers. Now, I know everybody know how to preach. I'm not critiquing anybody's preaching. I'll do it if you ask me, but I want it. But what do we preach in these moments? Where are the resources in the Bible that we can preach to our people? I'm willing to help people get the grease off the center of the stove because that's what I do. And that's what I can offer. And I think if in these pulpits we get more preaching that serves a liberation agenda, rather it being the exception rather than the rule. I come out of Trinity United Church. We are unashamedly Black and unapologetically Christian. And I can't go to a church that don't address the issues. I don't mean every Sunday, but every now and then, somebody ought to say something.
Captain.
I can't be a part of the church that can't say something and not willing to do something. So I'm going to stop there. And so I just want whatever you say as we shape a discussion, I would like to know, what are you willing to do? Because I think we live in a time of action. And though talking is important, I wish we had a African-American think tank that had already been able to develop a plan. See, these folks have think tanks, Project 2025, and they got, so they've already thought through. So when, we knew this was coming. We knew the high probability it was going, if we'd had a think tank already ready to drop to us. So let me stop. Yusef, I can come down. I can do whatever you need me to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. We designed this first meeting to be kind of fluid, so you're welcome to come express yourselves on the mic to the topic relevant to what we're talking about today. And everybody kind of is. We have time, but we also don't have time. So please, I know Reverend Parsons, I think you had some words to share. At least Reverend Jeanette said you had some words to share. Hope she didn't set me up for that. Did she set me up for that? Preachers are kind of funny. Yeah, and I'm kind of new to this, so it's like, she told me you had something to say here. She goes,
She's helping me out after this.
I'll bring this to you.
Thank you for reminding me, Dr. Frank, that I am a senior pastor. I became acutely aware of that yesterday. I was channel surfing, stopped at the History Channel and realized I remembered everything I was watching. And that's when I said, I guess I've been here for a while. So thank you so much. I want to thank Rainbow Push for hosting this event today. I think it's critical that we do more listening, talking, and interacting. I agree completely with the statements of Dr. Frank Thomas, whom I respect greatly. And I am disturbed, as you are, which is reflective of your presence, about the state of the church's staleness or reluctance to step into the fray. We are definitely facing perilous times. We were challenged when Obama was in the White House. A lot of people didn't know how to prophesy with a brother in the palace. And so they gave a lot of passes, ignored a lot of things that we would have confronted the executive on Pennsylvania Avenue about, but because he looked like us, and we decided his agenda was similar, concurrent with ours. However, I do believe that one of the things Dr. Thomas mentioned was training the clergy to not be afraid of what many have sectioned off as a forbidden territory for ministers of the gospel. And they tend to label it politics, when in fact it is being concerned about the interests of the populace in your sanctuary on Sunday. Because politics tend to rule every dimension of the lives of the people you preach to every Sunday. And so I agree, we need a school of the prophets, not a school of the preachers. And I hasten to make a distinction, that preachers are primarily engaged, preachers and priests are primarily engaged, and no front, Mike, it's good to see you too. But preachers and priests are engaged in liturgical events celebrating, Easter, baptisms, communions, et cetera, et cetera. The prophets are the people who scream to the extreme about things that other people think are just minutiae, are insignificant. And we need a prophetic voice. I was reading a few weeks ago, it must have been in Kings 22, I believe, and the king was searching for some advice from the clergy community. He consulted with 400 prophets, and his question was, is there another prophet in town? And so my question is, if in that small agrarian kingdom and community, in Kings, there were 400 prophets and still not one true one, what must the ratio be in Chicago and urban America today with thousands and no prophets present? But then you can't be dissuaded when you realize what the percentages are. There are few prophets who are willing to tell the king what he needs to hear as opposed to what he wants to hear. And I pray that we can find a way to create that school of the prophets and move it to regions of the country where we can train people, our ministers who can speak to the needs and concerns and not afraid to put their opinion in the public square because of the box they've been put in by their profession. We've got to speak boldly for the people. We cannot succumb to the tomfoolery of Sewell at the inauguration. That's the guy who prayed, if you forgot his name. And there's too many of us who believe that that proximity to the powerful means you are powerful too. It just means you are useful, not powerful. Powerful people don't want you close to them because they think of you like they think of themselves. They just discover that you are useful for the season. Yeah. So don't start thinking you got a buddy because you know somebody powerful. You're just a tool for the season. And so I think it's so important that we focus on how we can change the dynamics of now, but more importantly, how we can affect the future. Because one of the problems I see as organic in our community is that the theological perspective that is being indoctrinated to a whole lot of the people who lead churches in our community are not the biblical perspective and view of people like ourselves. And so, in other words, I agree with Theron that we've got a white theology in a black church. That's my buddy. And so I agree, you should read that book as well. But I think we need to make sure that ministers who look like us and who lead people like us have a familiarity with how they're going to integrate the preaching of social justice as a part of the gospel, because it should not be removed from the gospel. The other people are just faking the funk. They tell you they're not in politics, but the leadership council and so many others have become the kitchen cabinets for every executive in the White House. And so don't believe it. Why do you think 85% of white evangelicals voted for Trump if the preachers were all quiet? They just got you quiet, and you didn't say anything. Well, I don't talk about that. But you've got to talk about what's affecting and impacting the people you shout on Sunday. Matter of fact, the people who take care of you, your family, the scholarships for your kids, you've got to care about them, because the policies right now are going to impact them. DEI's exclusion from the body of the government mandates is going to impact all of those young people in your church who thought they had a shot at a level playing field. Well, they didn't ask me to speak. They just asked me to respond. Here's the mic, Yusuf. Thank you.
Give it up for Reverend Donald. Who's next? I will say with this break period, there's a reason Rainbow Push is here.
Yes, sir.
Everybody in Rainbow Push attends church on Sunday. And there's a reason why Rainbow Push is on Saturday and churches on Sunday. We have to continue to strengthen all of our institutions, our church institutions, and our civil political organizations like Rainbow Push. So I hope to see more of us on Saturdays. I hope you can see more of us on Sundays so we can strengthen each other. And I believe if we are prayerful, God will give us the answer to solve the riddle of this day. I do believe that. And I think if we continue to gather in this way, one of the reasons why I don't want to come up with a bunch of answers today, we got some answers, we got some ideas. They've been studying this a long, long time. And they've got an assault from the editorial boards, the writers, book writers, they got lobbyists, they've got legislators, they've got a whole church collective behind them to do what they're doing. They're not just attacking DEI. I have a certain kind of feeling about DEI. They're attacking EEOC. They went to the heart of the Civil Rights Act. I mean, this guy has gone straight in the middle. He's doing much more than he said he was going to do. And he's doing all he said he was going to do. And he's throwing up smoke. So our families are in peril. They were in peril before Donald Trump got here. And what's the role of the church in filling that gap? What's the role of the church in filling the gap that our schools are leaving behind? Reverend Jackson's been talking about training pastors so that you have a sustainability, because you can come out and say all what you want to do until you get hit in the head and your church funding drives up or something, or you lose your mortgage, or all these things start to happen. So we have to make sure we are trained for the long fight, because the actions that we take are not going to go without a counterpunch. So we've got to be strong enough and together enough not to be tricked, to be divided with words, or to be divided with our economics, because that will prevent us from reaching the land that we're looking for. But I'm going to open this up to those who also have comments. What I am saying here is that, you can come on up, is that we are desiring to fight.
Yes, sir.
Our government's in peril too. We've worked too hard to build the institutions of this government to let him just burn it down in a week. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
We can't let him burn this down in a week. So we are going to have to fight, but we've got to fight smartly. And always a disciplined use of our dollars, keeping our dollars in our pockets and shopping where we are respected and then putting pressure where we have leverage to put pressure has made a difference. So we are going to fight. We're going to fight right though, because once we jump in there, we're going to find ourselves some nights in the middle of the ocean feeling alone. And that's when our training's got to kick in to understand that you are never alone, that God is with you and also your brother and your sister is with you. Just a second, Pastor. We have one coming up.
My name is Rael Jackson. I grew up in Trinity as well, no relationship to Yusuf. I represent Real Men Charities. One of the things that I looked at this morning was that America is at the lowest level of reading scores of all time. And so one of the things that since AI has come up and social media is that reading comprehension is at its lowest level of all time. We're dealing with a lot of apathy. We have no kind of North Star. We tend to, like you said, we tend to talk about what's wrong instead of creating our own solutions or our own agenda. We have no black agenda. Someone asked that, if you say a black agenda, somebody will tell you why you're wrong or why you shouldn't do this. What I came up with for the month of Black History is that it's the 60th anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X. May 19th will be the 100th anniversary of the birthday of Malcolm X. So what I'm doing is a Malcolm X reading challenge to challenge men to read or reread the autobiography of Malcolm X, as well as gift that book to a young man. I believe that the book is anybody that's over the age of 12 has the ability to read the book. I know that men in my generation, a lot of men say that was the first book they read from cover to cover, and it also got them involved with literacy. The book is also the story is a story of literacy, spelling bee, going to jail, reading dictionary, becoming engaged in books. And I think that literacy, as you even brought your own book, is the key for our people. And I think we are getting further and further away from the reality of words and the possibility of words, no matter what it is that you believe, your religion or your own perspective is, we don't have that logical thing where people can actually work out what's right and wrong, or even the gray areas. I don't think, people even understand things of compromise, of allowing other people to have other perspectives. And so that's what I would like to do. And, as especially men, because I know women will definitely read whatever. If men are doing something, I know that women will join in and support. You guys have always been the backbone, but especially men, I'm challenging every man in here to reread or read for the first time the autobiography of Malcolm X and share that book with a young man. So that's what I'm willing to do.
Hey, thank you for that. That's healthy too. Let me offer. No, it's important. We got to celebrate the brothers who came before us and learn about them in depth. And that's a hell of a book to learn from. I know Bathsheba. We got 3 people who've asked to speak. 1, 2, and Mrs. Jackson is going to be third. Let me say this: when Black people win, we always bring people with us. Civil Rights Act, public accommodations, housing, that helped the whole country move forward. So don't be afraid to start deep with the least of these first, because when we win, everybody wins. At the same time, there are 8 million Black people in poverty, 16 million white people in poverty. And if you took away our health insurance, you'd have another 40 million people in poverty. So be mindful that there are a lot of people on the brink, on the edge of poverty here. So that's why it's beyond just our color. And we have to build coalition. We'll only get there together by coalition. We're all part of the same body politic. And by ignoring the body politic, I think it causes a level of divisiveness in us, which we can ill afford to be.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Connolly. I am the director of the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives with Chicago Public Schools. And in this role, even though I am a preacher, there's so much I want to say, but I'm going to try to stick to what I've been asked to do by our own Reverend Wilson. And I too, when I got the call that she wanted me to come and share some remarks, I could not say no. Today is a board meeting taking place. And as Youssef was just mentioning about the poverty levels, when you look at the Chicago public school system, just about 80% of our families are in low income residents. And so when you're talking about educating a population of people, which those who are at that level, that poverty level, there's Black and brown children. But at the bottom of the bottom continues to be Black children. One of the things I learned from my homiletics professor, Dr. Frank Thomas, he told us, he said, you have to figure out what your message is. What is your message as a preacher? And that was some years ago, and I didn't figure out what my message was probably until the pandemic. When we shut down during the pandemic, we being the city and government agencies, Chicago Public Schools had what was called essential workers. My office, Office of Faith-Based, we were not considered essential employees, but I told my team, I said, we have to figure out how do we show that we are useful and relevant, Dr. Parsons. And so what we did was we partnered with the faith community, and we were able to give out food to our families, about 1,000 families every week from March of 2020 all the way until May of 2021. But during that time period, what I realized was that there was so much fear that was pervading in our communities. So what is the antithesis to fear? Well, many of the preachers were saying we got to have faith. We got to continue to have faith. But I wrestled with that because the more I studied the ancient texts, I didn't see where fear or faith was the antithesis to fear. I discovered that it was something called love. Paul said God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but what did God give us? Power, love, and a sound mind. So I discovered that where there is an abundance of fear, there's probably a lack of love. And so what our office does, we're able to continue out the Great Command, which I tell my team, and Cameron, he stepped out, oh, there he is. I told Cameron, I said, listen, I don't want the testimony of our young people and our families to be that when I was hungry, you didn't give me anything to eat. When we didn't have clothing, you didn't give me anything to put on my back. When I was unhoused, you didn't help me find housing. And so even though our office is within the Chicago public school system, we are able to give out love to our families. And we do this in 3 ways, and I'll be quick so we can hear from the next presenter. But we have a program called Safe Haven. And Safe Haven is where the faith community, if they respond successfully to an RFQ, they have a contract with the city to provide out-of-school time activities to our young people. And there are several Safe Haven partners in this room today. I see Father Flager, I see Pastor Edie, and their churches are both Safe Haven sites. But we also do something called Adopt a School. Adopt a School is where if your church, your faith community, because this is across faith distinctions, if your faith community is in proximity to a school that you would like to adopt, we can help you adopt that school where you can provide up to 3 activities each school year to help that school execute its vision. And when you're talking about increasing reading scores and mathematics scores, a lot of it can take place if we can give these families more love. And I will say this, you have a lot of educators in our schools that don't look like our children. So when they're in those spaces and they don't have the cultural competency, we're wondering why they're struggling. And I'll just leave it at that. The other piece is we do crisis support. And this is a part of the work that I'm not necessarily proud of, but it is necessary because whenever a young person passes away in our school district, my office is the one that reaches out directly to the family. I'm sharing this information with you because this is not information that you're going to see on the news. We do a program every year. It's an event called Legacy of Love. Father Flaker was our speaker one year. And it's a program where we love on the families to let them know that we care about them beyond the passing of their loved one, beyond them laying them to rest. So what do? Well, we give them resources to help with the burial costs, but we also are working on a comprehensive follow-up plan because many of these young people, after they have passed away, they still have siblings that are in our school district. And we're wondering why we're losing families in our city. It's because of fear. And so we do this Legacy of Love once a year. This past year, we gave out gifts because it's in December. We give out clothing items. But these are ways that the faith community can partner with us. We have a sign-in sheet. Cameron is bringing it around. So if your church, your faith community would like to partner with us, we would love to be in touch with you. Thank you all for your time.
Let me say thank you for that presentation. We should have a separate meeting on schools and schools alone and how churches can be supportive of the needs of our children in schools. It's important. I mean, the facts speak for themselves, and so does the data, that when African American teachers teach African American children, the impact can be very different. At the same time, you have to learn how to deal with everybody in this world if you want to have some success. My daughter was fortunate enough to spend some time in Japan. She said, Dad, you know, they almost don't have waiters and waitresses here. There's barely anybody in the back cooking. They're all robots. So I want to make sure that the downtown and neighborhood jobs community has a relationship with Chicago Public Schools so you can have an understanding of the kind of educated workforce we need to be educating. Otherwise, you're educating me for a job that doesn't exist. And then you're just moving deck chairs on a Titanic. And that's not good either. So we got to make sure that we are one-to-one relationship between our education and the ability to get some work.
Thank you. My name is Beth Sheba Wyatt Draper, and I am the president of an organization called Power Women, Inc. I want to address the question that Pastor Frank said, what are you going to do? Well, here's what we're going to do. We are going to be starting in April having workshops on the midterm election. Our people need to understand the power of the vote during the midterm election. A lot of us got mad, things didn't work out, and so we're just looking at 4 years of 47. But we can change the balance of power in November. But we've got to get our people educated, motivated, and involved. And so I've talked to Reverend Thurston, I've talked to a couple of other pastors about hosting these workshops in your churches, host them at your organization. Contact us. My information that I'm going to be using, Pastor Frank is going to go over it so you know that I'm going to have the right stuff. But it's not hard. We're not trying to make it difficult. Who, what, where, when, and why. And how? This is empowering our people at the simplest level, at the easiest level. Go out and vote. We must continue to struggle that fight. We have to continue to let people know how important it is. That's what we're going to do. That's what I hope you're going to do. So when I call your church or I call your organization and say, can you host us for a workshop? I hope you'll receive us well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. My son. First, I want to thank all of you for being here at this time. You're in the right place at the right time. I wish my husband could be here today, but they may roll him in here any moment. I'm Jacqueline Jackson. America is in a crisis period of revolutionary proportion. I want to thank our speaker today. Of all the things that you said, it is imperative that as a result of this assembly here today, that we begin to seriously think about creating think tanks. I don't think we understand the importance of think tanks. The people who would oppress us study everything. They study our habits, the food we eat, how long we sleep, what kind of books we read. They study everything. And most of us are naive enough to think that nobody knows us. And they don't understand. And that's why we are so easily manipulated, relocated, and etc. For an example, and today they are more clever, but even though they are clever, they're more transparent. Our last president said we had to save democracy. It's like, who are you talking to? How are you telling me to save something I've never had? One of the things I learned while in South Africa with Mandela, and people were very angry after Mandela's reign, and I asked why. And they said he did not emphasize education. See, here's the little thing. In order to have a democratic society, your society must be literate. They must know what to ask for. They must know who to vote for. They must understand where they live, what their needs are. And without literacy, and it's interesting that we have come a long way, baby, but we forgot. You were encouraged not to read and not to be literate so you wouldn't know what was going on. Also, there's something that is in the air in our little, and I love Jesus, and I tell you, without God, when I sang it in elementary school, I was told without God, my life would be rugged, be like a ship without a sail. And if you don't have God, God ain't in the school. Isn't it supposed to fail? As we cast our ballots talking about my body and my whatever, aren't you supposed to fail without God? And we're looking at our country today that's at the cliff. And it's so wonderful that God brought us for such a time as this. We've always been the answer for this country because we have always prioritized our God because we know that there's something in the world greater than you and I. And when you get the big idea that you're it, you're destined to fail. I want to thank you. I want you to understand clearly. Now is the time. There's nothing that we have and own that should prioritize our efforts other than saving the land that we live in and the reason for God bringing us for such a time as this. Thank you.
The Reverend has a question for you, Mother Jackson. Public question or private question? What kind of think tank are you thinking about?
I think we should select, there's a wonderful body of ministers here, and all of you have a friend in another town, in another state. And we're talking about, thought about this morning, and when you said Tesla, every time we talk about saving ourselves, we always talk about there's a train coming, a set of chariots coming, a bus coming. Nobody said, we never sing about our car and getting in it. We talk about hitching our train or our bus to the next bus. We now must begin to organize our friends, the people who have the sameness of mind that we have, our friends, and begin there. I think we have to go to every sector. We should have an economic train We should have people, a think tank for people who do business and banking. We ought to think about, can you imagine we see more money today than we've ever seen in the history of our people, and we don't have a bank? It's mind-boggling.
Funds the think tanks. Who funds them?
We do it on a shoestring, just like we did everything. We're not looking for a financier. They become our leader.
Absolutely.
This is why we've tried to maintain the independence with this organization. This is why we beg so hard. They say Jesse Jackson beg all the time. Here he comes. And you've done so much for people. Why would we have to beg you? I mean, don't you know the things that you need and the representation that you need? And right now we are very disconnected. And I think usually when you begin with God, you end with God. My mother said the way you start off is the way you end up. And if we organize our think tanks through our ministers who have access to people who make money, you're the center of our organizations. Everybody tries to hook up to some church. What church do you belong to? And I used to hear that all the time when I first came to Chicago. And that kind of went out of style. And it's left up to us. The think tank starts with our ministers, and you must connect with each other. We have to stop competing. It's enough people to join every church, right. And we're all sinners, and we know we need some guidance. I want to thank you, and I've just tried to tell you where we need to begin, and that's right here and right now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mama Jackson. We have a couple more speakers, and if you got something to say, you better raise your hand and get on the line, because if we're not going to use the time, I'm going to give you your time back. But let me ask just one question. We need to do this regularly as we organize. Once a week or once every 2 weeks? Talk to me. We're going to set the next day for 2 weeks from now. We're going to come in 2 weeks. We're going to have paper for you to munch on and stuff to take away. And we're going to also start marching. Get a cadence on that. But we're going to have to bring our army to the streets. Okay. Al.
I know I'm on the clock, so I'm going to be real quick. I think in a lot of our institutions, we have to restructure our approach. First thing, we have people who are involved in all sectors of government, federal, state, local, township, even library boards. We need to pull these folks in because they are the ones who are at the center of all of this government funding that's going to shut down, number one. Number two, I even think the churches need to restructure a little bit. Why do I say that? Because we have people in our churches who go to school, who go to work. They're affected by every issue that they deal with. They come to church on Wednesday night for Bible study. They come to church on Sunday, and they have to encounter the world Monday through Friday. And so I think there should be ministers of education, ministers of public policy. There should be ministers of social engagement. It has to be restructured to meet the people's needs. I've been in politics now for about 25 years. And I've gone through the country, I've gone through the state of Illinois, I've gone through the Chicago metropolitan region. And you would not be surprised about the disengagement that communities have about, one, how the government is supposed to run, and the fact that there's no plan for a lot of these people to really change. In terms of a think tank, I think the first thing we do is that we have a political summit, just like we did in 1972 in Gary. I think that we also have an ecumenical summit with all of our preachers and leaders from all over the country to deal with these issues. I think we have an economic summit to deal with the fact that, all of this funding that the Trump administration has frozen, understand it's going to be gummed up for 2 years. because it's going to go through a series of court challenges. So what do we do in the meantime with that? Well, I think what we do is talk to our biggest, our brightest, and our wealthiest in our communities to talk about how do we combat that. One of the things I think we ought to do is talk about putting together a Black participation fund, which helps businesses get through the tough times. I think we get that in terms of some of our Black governments to get through some of the tough times, and our churches to go through the tough times. I think people like Ben Jealous, Magic Johnson, all of these folks who are at the centers of money in our country need to be called into the room immediately. If we don't, the suffering is going to be great. I can tell you this. And then I'm going to say one other thing too. Mobilization is got to be massive now.
Right.
And this is not just Black folks. This is poor white folks. This is Latino folks.
Right.
The person that you really need to understand who's behind this is really not Donald Trump.
Right.
It's a person by the name of Curtis Yarvin. Do you know who he is? Curtis Yarvin is a person from the ultra far right who feels that the American system of government should go into the trash. And what he feels is that American government is stale. He feels that it should be ran by those few that are sitting at the top in terms of billionaires and these oligarchs who are doing this. And so what he feels is that the American people should get over their dictatorial phobia. This is where 2025 came from. 2025 didn't come from the folks around Donald Trump. 2025 came from this man. So the community needs to expose him. The community needs to rebuke him. Look him up, Curtis Yarvin, look at his videos, look at the articles that he's written. This is the source of the pain that we've had. And they've been planning this now since 2016. Okay? So I think we really, really need to tighten ourselves up at all of our elbows and arms that we can. We have to make certain that everybody from the top to the bottom in the middle has a safety net that our community and other communities can actually build, because the suffering is going to be massive.
Thank you for that, brother. I will say, you're right, they've been planning this a long, long time. Sure, the Federalist Society started in the 1980s. They started grooming lawyers and judges, federal court positions in the 80s, consistent at the same time as the Reagan Revolution. So they have had us in their crosshairs for a long, long time in different aspects of society. All right, got a couple more? I see you, Eric. I need a mic over in the front side, sir. No, not almost. One up.
Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Dixon. I am a current doctoral student at Garrett Theological Seminary.
Hello, brother.
And just grateful to be in the space to hear a prophetic word from Dr. Thomas. It's always a pleasure to hear what you have to say and as you perceive things are right now. And you talked about, what are we going to do? And about reading. I think those things really resonated with me. There's a couple of books that I've been reading, class related, but I think they're very appropriate to now. There's a book called White Too Long by Dr. Robert Jones, and it speaks about the insidious nature of white supremacy and how it permeates every aspect of life here in America, and actually how it started, and it's actually still is reinforced through the evangelical, through the Catholic, through Lutherans, through Baptists, and all Protestant religions here in America, to think that white people, white supremacy is superior than all other marginalized groups. And so I suggest that you pick that up and read that. It's a very profound information in there. Another book I suggest is Unsettling Truths, and it speaks about the doctrine of discovery. And I think that gives a lot of information as it relates to how this country, how we live on the stolen property, stolen land that was already occupied, how the doctrine of discovery and how the white settlers have come in to co-opt the land and continue to do that in many areas all throughout the world. So, but I think that you're absolutely right. Now is the time for prophetic voices to challenge and dissent, and those who are able to stand and speak truth to power, and those that have not been co-opted by money or the illusion of equality, and to stand in your truth and speak to all people, because we definitely need it at this point. So
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Brother Eric, Father Flager, and we're going to close out for the next fortnight.
My name is Eric Thomas, and I have been a member of Rainbow Push now for 58 years. And I have seen us go through this before. I spoke to somebody and I said, you know, people complain about the cost of eggs. If Reverend was around, Reverend would have been called for a boycott. Just stop eating eggs. You know, imagine if we stopped eating eggs for 30 days, egg prices would come down. He said, just eat you a couple of sausages and a couple more pieces of toast and forget about the eggs altogether. The other thing is, we have allowed people to marginalize us. When you think about DEI and affirmative action, they've talked about that like that's some kind of dirty word, some kind of handout they're giving us, when the fact of the matter is, our tax dollars support every contract. Every government contract is supported by some of our tax dollars. The universities and colleges are supported by our tax dollars, and therefore, as business people, we deserve a share of the money that comes from these contracts, and they have just cut us out. Now, with all due respect, I think I heard people say we should meet 2 weeks. With all due respect, we don't have any time to waste, and I think we should really meet every week. Yusef, I want to tell you, I'm so excited. This has kind of, when I come to a meeting like this relieves my depression from watching Senate hearings and Donald Trump's news conferences, because you see, this tells us what we can do. And there's a difference between a political party and a movement. See, the Democratic Party is a party. MAGA is a movement. Right. They are meeting every week, plotting and planning and organizing congressional district by congressional district. They are threatening people. If you don't vote for these people, we're going to run somebody against you. And we need to tell some of these politicians, we need to target some of these politicians in these swing districts, these districts that Biden won, or Harris won, that some of these Republicans are in. We need to remind them that Trump is not going to be up for re-election, but you are. And we're going to be paying attention to how you vote, because I have said this, and I think that the Democratic Party, in my opinion, has been too silent. I'm very upset that they have decided to let too much go without response. The man is controlling the narrative, and you can see how important the narrative is. And so we need to definitely try to get our narrative out there and get organized congressional district by congressional district, and remind poor white people that broke is broke. If you broke, that ain't got nothing to do with color. And there's a reason that you are broke, is because people are keeping you from having access to the things that you deserve. So I just hope that I want you to know and to take something from Obama, I'm fired up and ready to go. I'm ready to revive Reverend's cut us in or cut it out.
Thank you, Eric. You know, how are you feeling about 1 week versus 2 weeks? Let me say that one more. Let me ask that one more time. Next week we try one, and then we start assigning some responsibilities, offer some accountability, and we start doing it every 2 weeks. But we have to hit the streets, because even the DEI, is that what we're fighting for? Or are we fighting for our share? So we got a lot of work to do together, right? We have to deconstruct some things in order to build it back up. We thought Donald Trump was going to come in and deconstruct, but he's demolished. He's not taking all the good little parts off and put them over here and dust them off and taking the bad parts. He's just carpet bombing our systems. Reverend Flager.
Okay. Quickly, I just want to say that I really think we have to refuse to be safe at this time. We've got to get beyond our safeness, beyond our politically correctness, who we hurt, who we don't have friends with, and that's got to be put out the window. All we keep hearing is that Donald Trump has no check. He's got the Congress, he's got the Senate, he's got the Department of Justice, he's got the Supreme Court. Well, the faith community ought to be the check. The faith community ought to be the one that holds him accountable and it does the check and balances. That's our job. We're supposed to be the conscience. We got to stop being, I think, reactionary and provide leadership and resistance. We all talking about 2025. Well, shame on us. Why didn't we have a 2025? We're responding to what they've been working on, as you said, Yusef, for years. They've been planning. We ought to have had our own 2025 that they had to respond to, but we didn't do that, so we're caught where we're at now. I think it's got to be a broad coalition of all faiths and all races and all creeds. I think that we have got to, as Dr. Thomas, I think you're right, we need a revival of our faith community, what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be the prophetic and not the pathetic voices. We are not in our churches supposed to be teaching people to cope with the world, but to conquer the world. That's our job. We're overcomers. We're not copers. And we've been having them too often, I think, given a buffering to cope with what's going on. I think the last thing is we got to provide this alternative leadership. Our people in our congregations in our city are hurting. They're becoming desperate. They're becoming hopeless. They're becoming depressed because we're not offering them an alternative to become fighters. Ezekiel, when he brought them all together, he raised an army. He didn't raise a church. He raised an army, and that's what we've got to do now. We've got to raise armies. We have an opportunity every single Sunday to raise an army. Our churches have to become the boot camps, and which are boot camps that we raise up an army that's going to fight back and give our folks an alternative to the depression and the anger and the hopelessness that is taking over. So that's just my thoughts.
Let me throw this out there. I'm gonna keep our 2-week schedule. You're right. Time is of the essence, but we need to measure twice and cut once, and we don't want to run out of energy early. This is going to be a long fight, and we need to prepare ourselves. So what our jobs are for the next time we meet is to bring a friend, a smart thinking friend with strong legs who wants to be active. That's what we need. We need a, no one will save us. No one will save us for us but us. And if you've listened to what we've said, we have all the power we need in our hands. We can do it. We're a very talented group. When we put our energies together, our mind towards it, nothing can stop us. Am I right about that? So I have to say, just as a point of privilege, I'm honored to be here with you all. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you. I pray that I serve you with a level of grace and humbleness, and I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. I've been looking up to you for so long. Reverend Doctor. Yep, and then we're going to pray quickly, and we're not going to pray about everything we said.
One of the things that I continue, maybe because I'm a quote unquote a scholar, the civil rights movement had a theological base that everybody understood underneath it. It revolved around nonviolence, and I know that we have Black Power as an alternative. But when we don't have a base of grounding of philosophy is not the word I'm looking for. Understanding about God, Dr. King, and there was training. And so my prayer is that we will get a base underneath us out of which, because when everybody just goes and does stuff and you can't last through the storm. And I think the civil rights movement lasted because there was an understanding. I know there was division. I know all that. So that's my continual thinking about this think tank is, Trinity has a black value system, and there's thinking about what grounds us and what unifies us. And upon agreement upon that, when we go out, we got something to go back to. And so Otis Marsh Jr. gave me a critique, not of Black Lives Matter movement. It was not a critique. His concern was how much stronger it would have been if we take time to get an understanding of fundamental principles and then move.
Thank you. I'm going to leave us with that word. Reverend, if you would close us out.
Let's assume our postures of prayer. Father, we thank you for this day. We're mindful of your mercy and grateful for your grace. We thank you for this place called Push, which has historically empowered us and equipped us to go out and share the gospel and to equip us to become the hands and the feet of Jesus in this place called Earth. We thank you for the wisdom that was shared with us today. We pray that the seeds that were planted would germinate and grow, and that we would not engage in prophetic lethargy, that we would go out with power, that we would make impact and change to make a mark on the world and not leave a scar. Thank you now for your power in our lives and what you're going to do in us, with us, and through us. Take us from this place, but never from your presence. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for coming. See you all in a couple weeks.